Greetings and welcome to Creative Briefing with me, Adam from Influxx Media. Creative Briefing is an ad hoc show that looks at all forms of creativity, whether it's animation or music or drawing, photography, video, whatever piques my interest of the day or whatever I have accessible resources to demonstrate. I try and encourage anyone and everyone to explore their own creativity. It encapsulates the better part of our humanity, I always say, and it definitely keeps our brain active, engaging that creative side of our brain. It's definitely what makes us human, and it definitely helps keep us active and healthy mentally, exercising that creative part of the brain and exploring ways to be creative. So today I'm going to look at some ways I like to use, and I highly encourage others to use, to capture ideas quickly, whether you are just someone at home scrapbooking, whether you are a DIY enthusiast, a home woodworker, or whether you're a digital artist creating artworks in Illustrator or After Effects, or an animator or a character designer. Whatever it is, I highly encourage everyone starting the project with a pencil sketch. I start almost every project with a pencil sketch, regardless of what it is. I do a lot of DIY and build stuff, crafty stuff, whether it's, themed Christmas decorations, characters, life-size characters from Nightmare Before Christmas, whether it's a landscape irrigation system in the backyard. I will start sketching things out on paper first. So I want to look at ways to capture those ideas quickly. I'm going to look at some case studies, look at some sketches I've done for projects. These are all sort of client-based design projects, but how the project started out with a quick pencil scribble and evolved into sort of finished art. And I will maybe sort of demonstrate a couple of ideas how to put that pencil sketching into practice. Now I use, as you can see here, I'm just using, this is just printer paper. It comes in reams of 500 sheets or something. So let's get back to it. So I was saying about using the photo paper. One thing I like about it too is that you can put a sheet aside and start another sketch, and it lays flat with a pad. You're folding it over, and if you want to reference that page that you just sketched, you then either have to tear it off, and it's not quite as clean. You got bits of ring binder, or the tear along the seam isn't quite as neat. With these flats, it's just they're always the exact same size, so you're not getting rough edges where the tear is. They lay flat. You can lay them out, tape them to the wall, which is usually what I do. So I really like that. Now I usually use letter, or I have 11 by 17, which is a little larger. Legal is also good. It gives a bit more of a wide format. So that's the paper. The pencil, I'm just using, in this case, just a regular yellow HB pencil. HB, 2B, something on the softer side, nothing too soft, because it's a little bit chalky and smudgy. Anything too hard, and then you end up kind of pressing too hard on the paper, and the marks aren't quite as light. HB, 2B is optimum for me. So when we're looking at a project, I'll just start with quick sketches, and this was for a children's school room type of thing. So it was for a mural that was going to be created on the wall and wrapping around a door. There was going to be some naming stuff. All of these sketches were like 5 minutes at best. It was just scribble the ideas out. The proportions of the door are all wrong. That's not important. Where I have this goat character, it's very, very thumbnail and silhouetted and stick figures for the legs, similar to the human character. I'm just trying to capture an overall flavor of A, the style of illustration, and B, the proportions of what's going to go where, and maybe any props that might be involved, any notes for elements that might need to be on the stage. Then we might even do a sort of rough perspective of how props might fit into the corner or any other elements that might be in the room so we can get an overall idea of capturing the space. Then I might go into something a little more finished, where I've decided my my elements and the proportions, and now I'm using a straight edge to keep the lines even. I've measured out some proportions a little more accurately, and I'm using some light lines to flesh things out, but then I'm going over with heavier lines to really define those shapes, and I'm being a bit more precise with some of the details. There's overall a lot more details being put in. Also, I like to use tracing paper. Tracing paper is great for iteration and versioning. So I might create, a look, and then I'm going to go over that area, or I might create this. It was for a user interface for an app I was designing, so I knew I wanted this area to be for a character, so then I could then just, without having to recreate the whole thing, I can then just focus on the character. I can then trace that over that, trace, and I can then create some versions, or I can create a series of heads on a body, and I can create versions very quickly without having to sort of draw a lot of different repetitive elements. Tracing paper is great for versioning and for experimenting, and I'll often use tracing paper just for quick scribbles as well, like I might have done with the previous example I showed you. And tracing paper will allow us to, say for example, if I had a door that I had sketched and I wanted to do the stuff around it, but maybe the door was in slightly the wrong place, but everything else I had sketched in that room was adequate. Well, with tracing paper, I mean, alternatively, you could use just regular paper and a light box, which I also do, but a light box is a bit more cumbersome. Tracing paper is just a bit more user-friendly. Again, it lays flat, single sheets, and you're not really creating a big bulky area workspace for yourself. Again, when we're doing iteration, I use a light box when I'm tracing my finished piece, perhaps, or tracing my sketch in ink, where the light box comes in handy. But when I'm versioning, I would definitely want that stream of consciousness to be uninterrupted. I'm going from one version to another very quickly, and just shuffling sheets of paper around helps me do that. So in this example for the room, maybe I like everything, and I'm just going to trace over everything else I have in the room, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel in that regard. So I'm just going to trace over everything I've already done, but I want the door to be maybe over on this side because I got that wrong, or we have the option to move something, or maybe this element here needs to be moved over so that I can make space for something else. Tracing paper will allow me to shift things while really being able to see clearly where the other elements are going, so I can sort of piece together, you know, different elements that are going into that design. So tracing paper, I really recommend keeping that around. When we're doing character sketches, thumbnailing and wireframing poses and exploring different poses, and just sketching for fun as well. If I'm just sketching just for the fun of sketching to keep myself creatively engaged, sketching stream of consciousness ideas is it's useful, and it's great too. So like for example, looking at different poses for an action sort of scene or character, and then some sort of facial sketches there, again messing around with poses, action poses. So what I want to do is look at how I would, you know, wireframe a character like that. You know, we use the 8 heads. I use the 8 heads rule, where, you know, a head is so big, and then we extrapolate that out, you know, 8. You may have seen this referenced online a lot. 8 heads is very sort of common for comic book characters. So, you know, the first head is the nipples, the chest area, and then there's the navel, and then there's the crotch or the hips, and then we have the kneecaps just above the 6th, and then there's the feet on the floor. So we have our 8-headed character. We'll do the little draw a center line. We'll have the triangle for the neck and collarbone area, that sort of collarbone diamond. Elbow is around the same as the navel. Do a little knot for that. Around the 5th is where the fingertips are, so we have the hands here, and then the forearm. That might be a little bit higher. Then we have the hips are right here. We have the rib cage, the trunk, the hips, the legs. So that's generally how I, you know, it's very common to proportion a body like that. Now when we're doing a wireframe, I know I'll have maybe a sketch like this in mind, so I can keep reference to it. Usually I don't have to, because I'm familiar with this sort of construct. So for example, let's look at a maybe a character in a sort of an exercise workout pose. You draw my arc of like the energy, the overall angle they're moving at. The shoulders will be dipped, the hips will be slightly less like that. The head, so that's 1, that's 2, 4. Then we've got the hips here. And again, with sketching, it's all about very, very light touches and scribbling, stream of consciousness. We're trying to capture this stuff very quickly. So I'm not really concerned with getting, you know, exactly what the hips are like. I'm really trying to capture the rough. And again, with tracing paper or a light box, I can go over and readjust those later. Or I can erase, or I can go over my light touches with a darker touch. So at this stage, we're just blocking out. Get the trunk, the barrel of the rib cage. Now in this case the chest would be twisted, so I'll draw a center line, and we see more of the side of the rib cage and less of this side. Got the triangle of the collarbones. And then the shoulder, this one would be dropped, and the arm maybe coming out to the, maybe touching the floor. The spine to this leg will be stretched, and let's see, we got one. Okay, so knee bone would be right about there. Shin bone, and then the foot. This leg, about there, and then so this arm will be coming up, shoulder will be raised. Let's see, so this arm was about that long, so maybe about there. This arm's over the head. So we have this character pose that has a certain amount of energy. Maybe the hips could be adjusted this way a little. But we have this character pose that has some energy. It's a very a very quick sketch that enables us to sort of get the essence of where we want to go. And after we've done that, we can start adding in muscle groups to, to build up the greater part of the character. I won't go into that right now. I just want to talk about ways to quickly sketch without getting too encumbered and too bogged down with the idea of creating art. I would do a number of these wireframe explorations that would adjust something a little different each time. And again, tracing paper might help, but for something like this I might just do the same thing, do the arc. Maybe I'll start with the rib cage, and I'll do the head maybe up more, and do the arm at a slightly different angle, and do this arm kind of coming back across the body. Again, trying to keep these proportions in mind, and just finding ways that capture maybe the essence of the panel, the story, or the illustration that I'm trying to, capture with this pose. Maybe the guy's jumping and his foot is whoops. You can see just using the wireframe technique enables me to capture that very, very quickly. Okay, so that's wireframing for, say, human figure. What about maybe let's take another character. We want to do something. Let's say like a dopey Viking, not Ragnar Lothbrok, something more along the lines of How to Train Your Dragon, the Vikings of Berk. Incidentally, the Vikings of Berk, I mean, they are Vikings, they are Northmen, they are Danes, but why do they all have Scottish accents? That always confused me. The Scots were Picts and Celts and other sort of barbarian tribes, but the Danes were the Danes. Vikings was very specific sort of barbarian tribes. So it always threw me. Why were they Scottish? Anyway, let's look at just quickly scribbling, trying to capture an idea of a dopey Viking. So again, lightly sketching. We're not creating the finished shape, we're just sort of capturing the area. We can always go in and add our darker lines over the top. So let's capture our center line where the eyes would be, center line where the nose would be. It's got that sort of dopey half closed eyes. Got a big bulbous nose. Maybe that can bleed into that a little bit. Again, just going over and loosely capturing everything. Let's give him a nice big, great big Danish blonde mustache. You know, I'm really just sort of wiggling the pencil in sort of in a random fashion just to create an organic energy. I'm not worried about, is this what the finished artwork is going to look like, or B, is this how a beard actually goes? No, I don't really care about that. I'm just trying to get the effect of something that's a bit more loose and organic. And I can add a few of those into here. Let's round out his cheeks a little. He's got give him a chin, lower lip. Just add some shading underneath that lower lip, because this area is usually in shadow, and that helps define the lower lip. Let's give him a Viking helmet of some kind. It's a little over large, goes around his head. A little bit of shadow. Again, just loosely sketching out. Can go back in with the light box or the tracing paper to. And even tracing paper helps with things like symmetry. So maybe one side of the helmet looks better than the other. I can then flip some tracing paper and create that perfect symmetry. So let's create an oval, base there for the horns. Of course, Viking helmet, it wouldn't be complete without some kind of ram's horns on there. Every cliched Viking character has a horned helmet. How authentically true that is, I've never seen Lagertha wear a horned helmet. We can just add some very, very rough ideas of shading just to capture the idea of the shape. And here's where the symmetry kind of comes into play. I could have the intention of creating symmetry with tracing paper, so I could just like this area and then just fudge this one in, because I know I'm going to recreate that with a symmetrical flip-flop. So I've kind of quickly created a character, created a little sketch just by working out some shapes and building up and layering some pencil strokes until I had something I liked. It's not finished, but I can then take this and evolve it onto something else. I can ink it, bring it into Photoshop, or I can paint over it. I can continue in paper and pencils for a while. Finally, let's take something that is not art or design. Let's take a look at let's say I have an idea to build a bird box, or maybe a bird feed box. So I want to get an idea of what components and what scale and shape these things want to be. So, you know, we'll loosely sketch in, say, a cube area. Again, we're being very, very light with our touches, and we're just building up, trying to get the overall perspective of this dimensional cube. And I'm not worried about the accuracy of the perspective. This isn't a engineering drawing. I'm just getting a rough idea, trying to capture the idea I have in my head. Oh, I want to build this object, whether it's functional or a work of art. I've got this idea to build something. What's it going to take? This is the initial capture of the idea. So I've got my box. I know that the base is going to have some dimension, so I can start going in with my more controlled, darker lines. And that's the depth of the base. I know it's going to have some kind of upright at the back that will also have some depth. I know that there will be a tray inset on the base, where the actual feed. So again, I'm just sketching out the general proportions and understanding roughly how perspective works and how elements will connect and will have depth, so I can see. And I'm thinking about how they're going to connect together by drawing this edge here. I know that this element here is going to attach to this element here. And I can go back in and darken up the important lines or trace over it. Again, I'm capturing the initial thoughts right here. Might add in some occlusion just to make it feel like it's grounded. So the roof or the lid or the top, whatever, I want to be somewhat angled. So I'm going to try and keep those angles consistent. I want it to overlap at the back a little bit, so it will hang over the back. Maybe it will be a little bit foreshortened at the front, so it will come up to here. Give it some depth. Extrapolate the perspective, and same thing with this line of perspective. Well, it will be, that will be that edge, and then so now I've got a sketch, an understanding of how this bit wants to be. Now I can do the same sketch from a different angle. I can start doing my plan drawing. So from the top it would be like that. The roof would be a little bit foreshortened, and these bits inside. Now I've got my overall understanding, I can start extrapolating that out into greater detail, but I've captured the initial thought, I've captured my initial concept. Maybe this isn't right, maybe it takes 3 or 4 more conceptual drawings, and usually it does, and superhumans are able to get the thing down in the first sketch. It usually takes a little bit of exploring one thing and correcting this or that. So there you go, drawing and sketching to capture ideas. Free sketching without the hindrance of creating art, not being precious. We're just exploring different versions, different poses, different facial features, whatever it will be. But most importantly, it's the stream of consciousness. If you're creating art of any kind, you're probably already sketching on paper. I know a lot of people might use graph paper or lined paper, and that's totally fine too. But if you're not, if you're going straight to digital or straight to marking up wood or whatever it might be, I do encourage the idea of brainstorming. And even if you're not going to create anything, just sketching to keep the creative brain engaged, highly encourage it. Pad of paper or a ream of photocopy paper and a box of HB pencils. Costs nothing, and you can take it everywhere with you. Alright, thanks for watching, hope you found it useful. Got any comments? Add them to the thread of this video or any of these channels right here. Just give me a shout if you have any questions regarding this or any of the other topics I've covered, or if you have suggestions for topics you'd like me to look at or to discuss. I encourage you to explore your creativity, go forth, be creative, have a great day, and I will see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.